All right, this video is going to be a little different than my typical. First, I got to give a shout out to Eravin, or however you say this guy's name. He made a great guide for making the best weapon enchantment, and he actually explained why the order matters. I haven't really been able to find exactly why it does before this guy, and I've had a lot of people try to answer, and most of them have been wrong. And the few that have been correct have actually explained it horribly. So he's earned a like and a subscribe from me and a shout out. Did a really good job. However, in this video, there's something he got wrong. So I'm going to talk about first what he got right and try to explain it my own way, and then move to what I think he got wrong and give him a little nitpick. So we're going to talk about weakness stacking because that's what his video is about. So first, why is this the good order? Well, that's because the effects go in that order. So many people have been telling me that they actually start from the bottom, and this is why weakness to magic needs to be on the bottom. They actually go in order, and the damage from a spell cannot be buffed by a weakness from the same spell, and that's included for a weapon swing. So for example, in the good order, my first swing will deal damage and then apply these weaknesses, and my second swing will deal the boosted damage because those weaknesses came from my first swing. So they haven't refreshed yet. The damage will happen boosted, and then my weaknesses will be refreshed and also boosted because of weakness to magic. If you do this in a bad order, for example, weakness to magic will happen, weakness to shock will happen, and my shock damage will happen. The exact same as my first swing in the good order. But my second swing, what will happen is right away my weakness to magic will refresh, and it will be boosted because it is boosted by the weakness to magic that is now on the guy I'm attacking, but that will no longer boost the weakness to shock because weakness to shock cannot be boosted by weakness to magic from the same weapon swing. Because that weakness to magic has been refreshed, now it will not apply to any effects underneath it because it's part of the same attack. Same goes for shock damage. Because it's part of the same attack, it will not boost the damage. If you did something like this, it would be a little bit better. Your weakness to magic would be buffing your shock damage because the shock damage would hit before weakness to magic, and then weakness to magic would refresh. The weakness to shock, however, would not be increased by weakness to magic because what would happen is your weakness to magic would refresh, and therefore anything underneath it could not be improved by that specific weakness. So it goes in order from top to bottom. Any weakness things just need to be last. That's how it functions. I think everybody kind of already knew that, but it was nice to actually hear it explained. So big shout out to Eravin, very proud of him. A couple things I heard people asking about in his comments was one, how do the alternating weakness stacking, how does that work? That's how you get up to the 7,000 multiplier. I don't really need to talk about that. I think if you want to watch my destruction deep dive, I really go into the details and the math of that. I really want to talk about his weakness enchant because in his video, he recommends doing 97% weakness to shock and 86% weakness to magic. And this is so he can get a couple extra charges on his weapons. Now, to clarify, he does say you can do it however you want. Make sure it's something that matches your build for how you want to do it. You know, balance it yourself. And in all fairness, his method works great, and he gives great advice about getting Azura's Star, adding Soul Trap to the weapon, getting Black Soul Gems. All those things are great. But the fact is, if you're trying to do something this cheesy already, chances are you're playing on Master. You're trying to do thousands of damage because this says the real best weapons, not the second to best weapons, but the best. And I want to show you how impactful having 100% weakness to magic is versus lower weaknesses to magic. So first, if he only had 50% weakness to magic, your magic multiplier before you've swung or cast anything starts at 1 because if they have no magic resistance or weakness, it just starts at 1 because they haven't cast any weakness to magic yet. And when you cast 50%, that goes up to 1.5. The second one will now be multiplied by that 1.5, and 1.5 times 50 is 75. So now they will have 75% weakness to magic, and that will be their new multiplier, 1.75, because they have 75% weakness to magic. You can keep casting 50% weakness to magic, and it will actually never get to a 2 times multiplier because of the way this effect works, the way it stacks. So even though weakness stacking is really powerful, if your weakness to magic magnitude is low, it will actually never get high enough. It will have a point where it stops improving. And I actually learned this thanks to one of my commenters, Shuring Leon, so I should probably give him a shout out too. A lot of people teaching me things as I've been making these videos. He did 86% weakness to magic. And I want to show that after 12 casts or swings, I should say swings because he's using an enchanted weapon, the multiplier for his magic is only times 6 because he has about 513% weakness. Where if this was 100%, if I change this to 100%, Well, that times 6 becomes times 13. Oh, that changed a lot of things. We're going to undo that because I don't want it messing with my other stuff. But as you can see, times 6 is all you're going to get after 12 swings. So it's not as powerful as that times 13. It's less than half. Okay, so, but he didn't do just weakness to magic. He did weakness to magic and shock. At no swings before he's attacked, everything will have 1 multiplier. And so his first swing will deal that 10 shock damage that he put on there. And that will apply the weaknesses. So now he will have 86% weakness to magic and 97% weakness to shock, giving him a 1.86 and a 1.97 multiplier. Damage is those two multiplied together, that 1.86 and that 1.97. So the final damage multiplier for shock is 3.6, giving you 36 damage. I just gave a little column here for cumulative, so the damage, the 10 plus the 36 is right here. As you keep doing that, as you notice, the multiplier, the final damage multiplier is about 1, 3, 7, 11, 15, 19, and it starts to slow down. And after you've gotten to a lot of swings, it ends at about 56, maybe 56 and a half. It's evening out those percentages. Because you're only doing 86, it's only ever going to get to this high. Now, that's still a massive multiplier, and doing 500 damage every swing is plenty to kill enemies in this game. But that's after 40 swings. It is going slower. And so I want to show you what it would look like if he just put 100% weakness to magic and shock on there. Much cleaner numbers, first of all. But again, the multipliers start at 1. The first hit does 10 damage. We're at 10. But the second hit gives 100%, making that multiplier 2. So comparing that 3.6 isn't that different, 3.6 to 4. But after the next swing, we're comparing 9 to 7.2. 16, we're comparing to 11. Pretty quick here. By 7 swings, we're comparing 49 to 23. So we're doing a lot more damage. Here's the cumulative. I put down here a comparison of the cumulative damage. So the damage lost overall after 13 swings is over 5,000. Even by 7 swings, it's about 500. And you might think, are things even going to live that long? I saw in his video that he was killing things pretty quickly. Well, a Zivili has 18 times your character level in health. So if you're level 30, they'll have 540 health, and they have 50% spell absorption. So on Master, they'll have 3,240 effective health because you do 1/6 damage. So unless you're using poisons or summons, you're going to need to deal 3,240 damage. And with this method, 3,240 is going to happen on your 10th swing. Fact is, with 50% spell absorption, that's going to take you about 20 swings on average because they're going to just simply absorb half your attacks, which is devastating. Where here, we needed to get to 3,240, that's at 14 swings. So 4 more swings than the 10, 4 more swings. With that spell absorption compared to 20 attacks, now we're looking at 28 attacks. So it's a lot more, 8 more attacks to kill a single Zivili late game. So if you're actually high level playing on Master, you want to put 100% weakness to magic and 100% weakness to shock, because even though saving some charges is a good thing, if you're playing on Adept or Expert, maybe doing 800 damage is enough, and so it doesn't matter. You'll kill them so fast. At the very beginning, these two aren't that different. But as you get to these really crazy numbers, after my 13th swing, I'm doing 8,000 damage, which that doesn't happen over here until my 24th swing. So 11 swings later. It's a big difference. Okay, we're moving around a lot. So now we're going to actually look at the magicka cost and the charges. So what he had was 86% weakness to magic, 97% weakness to shock for 2 seconds each, 10 shock damage, and let's add 1 second soul trap because I think that's pretty much needed. That would give him 40 charges on a grand soul gem. And that's because, well, the whole cost of that is 39.8, and a grand soul gem has 1,600 magicka that it contains. It's just magicka, just mana. Because it costs this much per attack, 39.8, when I add up those base costs there, it gets that 40. That's where I got that number. 1,600 is the full mana that it has, the magicka. If we bump this up to 100, and we bump this up to 100, well, it's 36.97. You might think, oh, that's 4 less charges, but you could do 99% shock, and it's 37. So it's only 3 less charges. It's not very different. The amount of magicka, let's make that a different color. The amount of magicka, 43.27 versus 39.8, it's not much more that you're going to have to be recharging. It's really not different at all. Remember, a grand soul is 1,600. A common soul is 800. You're going to be able to recharge that just fine. On top of that, sadly, I'm going to say I'm not very good at this game. And 2 seconds is if something goes wrong, that spell absorb happens from the Zivali, for example, you get staggered, you miss, you have to block, you're running away, you're healing, your buffs are going to fall off. So I would really recommend putting this to 3 seconds and just accepting that you're only going to get 28 charges. I think that's okay. I still think it's worth it to have these bonus things. The last thing I want to talk about is he said he was going to add this spell on top of his weakness, where he puts 100% weakness to shock and magic from a spell before he starts swinging with his enchanted weapon. And this is a great idea because even if it ends, it's going to start your multiplier higher. And so with him using that 86% and 97%, these damage numbers are much higher. As you can see, this is assuming that that debuff doesn't fall off. So that 30 seconds of weakness is still on there. But that's because the 100% is so powerful that it's allowing these multipliers to get a lot higher. So now we're looking at getting to 8,000 damage in 10 swings. It's much faster. Again, though, 16,000 damage on the bottom there. We're doing about double if our weapon had 100% magic and shock weakness instead. The difference is huge. And here I put the cumulative damage difference. The first swing is obviously the same, it's 10 damage. The second swing's already a 13 damage difference, and the damage difference very quickly ramps up. This is how much more the enchant I'm talking about would do than his enchant, if you're casting that spell that he talked about, this Hexa vulnerability that he's suggesting you use, which honestly I think is a great idea as well. The only problem I will say that has is that at 100 destruction, even as a touch spell, that costs 76, which is very expensive. If you only have 50 destruction, you couldn't really cast it at 33. That's just to show you the base cost. If you put it as an enchant on a weapon, for example. But at 50 destruction, the earliest you could cast it, it's 304 magicka. It's not very reasonable or plausible to be casting that on every single enemy. So maybe you would save that for the most powerful enemies, perhaps. And frankly, ideally, these enemies would be dying in 15 seconds. I think it'd be much better to have a 10-second one that would cast 1/3 of that. 76 divided by 3, if it only costs 25, that's actually not so bad. And maybe, we could turn that into a target spell. So we'd say times 1.5 to turn it into a target spell. It costs 38 to give them weakness for 10 seconds. That would let you ramp up really quick, do some big damage. And even if it fell off, by that point you would have a lot of stacks going. Your swings would still be doing crazy damage. And worst comes to worst, you can refresh it. There's nothing wrong with refreshing that spell that you cast. So I think doing the lower duration, you don't want to do too low because you want to get the weapon swings in there, and because your weapon swings only last 3 seconds, it's not like you can keep refreshing it. But if you need to get one spell cast in between your weapon swings, that's when the weakness actually gets really crazy. And that's actually another reason I would put this at 3 seconds. Realistically, if you want to be extra careful, you can go to 4. I wouldn't do that. I think that's overkill. You don't really need that much time, unless you're, frankly, maybe not very good at the game. This cap, by the way, for your spells is 85. So if you wanted to bump this up to, what can we look at, 17 damage? Yep, 18 is too high because it's above 85. So if we did 4 seconds, the most we could do is 17 damage. Still a lot of damage, though. I mean, that's 70% more than all the numbers I was showing you. So 70% more than 8,000, 70% more than 32,000. It's crazy numbers. So if you are playing on Master Mode, this is kind of required to be one of the ways to just nuke enemies. Other than poison or summons, this is the only way you're doing those thousands and thousands of damage at high levels. I know a lot of players will keep their level low so they don't have to fight that Zivali, or maybe they'll only fight the Zivali at, I think the weakest it'll be is level 20. I can't remember exactly when they appear. So they will have to do a lot less damage. I think that kind of makes you a bitch. I think it's a valid strategy to delay a level perhaps until you have everything ready and set up in master difficulty. But you're not really playing master difficulty if you're just trying to keep yourself at level 3 or something by never sleeping. You're not seeing the harder enemies. Why would you raise the difficulty to then avoid fighting anything difficult? I think that's pretty lame. So I don't recommend that, just for your own pride. Last, I was going to talk really quickly about the power of alternating those spells, these multipliers. If I hit with my dagger first and then cast that spell, and then hit with the dagger and cast with that spell, hit with the dagger, cast with that spell, and I was able to keep both debuffs up, by only a total of 8 casts, meaning 4 weapon swings and 4 spell casts, our multiplier for damage would be 7,000. So you obviously would not even need to get that high. You saw how much the Zivali had. It was a few thousand health. We could do 4 casts. So 2 weapon swings and 2 casts of my spells and do a 40 damage spell. And I would do over almost 6,000 damage, blowing up any enemy you need. So really when you'll be able to alternate a weakness to shock spell and a weakness to magic spell combined with the weakness to shock and weakness to magic enchant, that's when things get really crazy, but that does require higher durations because if your durations are too low, like those 2 seconds, they fall off and then you lose half of that. And that's, you're basically starting over from the beginning and you're starting over doing this 10 damage or 40 damage. So you really need to make sure your durations are high enough that you're able to ramp it up and not have it fall off, whether that's from spell absorption, from getting staggered. Things happen in the real game. And so I recommend 3 seconds. That's kind of the sweet spot for me, but really it's up to your preference. 4 seconds, I'm kind of getting older. My reactions are slower. I count slower, so time kind of slows down. Maybe I'll bump it up to 4 seconds later in the future. But I think that's all I got. Thanks for watching.